Tomorrow morning, you wake up, and every screen in your house is still glowing. Your phone has full battery. Your laptop opens instantly. Your smart TV hums to life exactly like it always does. But nothing loads. No messages, no feeds, no maps, no music. Every device you own is working perfectly, and every single one of them is completely, utterly useless. You might think this is the setup for a cheap disaster movie, but the uncomfortable truth is that the machinery holding your online world together is far more fragile than you have ever been told, and it has already come within days of catastrophic failure in your lifetime. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The internet is not a cloud. It is not floating above you in some abstract digital heaven. It is a physical object. It is a sprawling web of glass threads, each one thinner than a human hair, bundled into cables that run under streets, across deserts, and along the freezing black floor of the ocean. Research firms like Telegeography, which map the world's undersea cables, track hundreds of these submarine lines snaking between continents, and the overwhelming majority of all international data travels through them. Not satellites, cables, physical, breakable, chewable cables. Sharks have bitten them. Ship anchors have snapped them. Fishing trawlers drag them up by accident. Every message you have ever sent across an ocean traveled through a glass thread lying in the dark, thousands of meters below the waves. So what could actually take the whole thing down at once? Not a shark, not an anchor. The most serious answer comes from the sky. In September 1859, a British astronomer named Richard Carrington was sketching sunspots when he witnessed a blinding flash of white light erupt on the surface of the sun. What he had just seen was a solar flare, a colossal explosion of energy, followed by something called a coronal mass ejection. In plain English, that means the sun physically hurled a piece of itself at the Earth. A billion-ton cloud of charged particles crossed the distance between the sun and our planet in less than a day. When it hit, the sky caught fire. Auroras, the shimmering lights normally trapped near the poles, blazed so far south that people could read newspapers by their glow at night. And the telegraph, the only electrical network humanity had at the time, went haywire. Operators were shocked at their machines. Telegraph paper burst into flame. Some lines kept transmitting even after being disconnected from their batteries, powered by nothing but the electrified atmosphere itself. That was the Carrington Event. It struck a world whose entire electrical civilization consisted of a few telegraph wires. Now ask yourself a simple question. What happens when a storm like that hits a world where everything is a wire? This is not a hypothetical fear invented for views. According to NASA, in July 2012, a solar storm of roughly Carrington-class power tore across Earth's orbit and missed us. The planet had passed through that exact region of space only about a week earlier. 9 days. That is approximately how close you came, in your own lifetime, to finding out what this video describes. The insurance market Lloyd's of London later examined what a direct Carrington-level hit would do to the modern power grid, and its assessment put the potential damage in the trillions of dollars, with recovery for some regions measured not in days but in months or even years. Trillions. With a T. Because a storm that size does not just knock the internet offline. It can physically cook the giant transformers that keep power grids alive. And those transformers are enormous custom-built machines that take a very long time to replace. But you do not even need the sun to break the internet. Sometimes the internet breaks itself. In October 2021, one of the largest technology companies on Earth vanished from the network for roughly 6 hours. Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp did not crash because of hackers or storms. They disappeared because of a misconfiguration in something called BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol. Think of BGP as the Internet's system of road signs. It is how every network on the planet announces where it is and how to reach it. When those announcements went wrong, it was as if the company's entire digital territory had been erased from every map on Earth simultaneously. The servers were fine. The data was fine, but no one could find them. Billions of people were locked out because a set of invisible road signs pointed nowhere. Now imagine that failure not in one company, but cascading through the systems that connect everything. So let's stop circling and actually visualize it. The internet disappears tomorrow. Not one app, not one country. All of it. Let's walk through your first 72 hours. Hour 1. You assume it is your Wi-Fi. You restart the router. You restart it again. You toggle airplane mode like a nervous ritual. Then you notice your neighbor standing in the street, staring at their phone with the exact same expression you have. That is the moment your stomach drops. Hour 3. You try to pay for coffee. The card terminal spins and dies. Card payments in most modern shops are just tiny internet messages asking a distant bank for permission. No internet, no permission, no coffee. The people ahead of you in line are digging through pockets and bags for physical cash, and many of them do not have any, because you live in a world that spent 2 decades teaching you. Cash was obsolete. The ATM around the corner is no help. It also needs a connection to know who you are. Hour 12. The supermarket shelves are still full, but the checkout lines barely move because every sale is being rung up manually, if the store is open at all. Behind the scenes, something bigger is jamming. Modern supply chains run on just-in-time logistics, a system where stores hold only a few days of stock and rely on a constant internet-coordinated ballet of trucks, ships, warehouses, and barcodes to restock automatically. That ballet has stopped mid-step. Nothing looks wrong yet. But the clock on every shelf in your city has started ticking. Day 2. Your job, if it involves a screen, has effectively evaporated. Hospitals fall back to paper charts, and doctors can no longer instantly pull up your scans, your allergies, or your prescriptions from another building. Airports crawl because everything from ticketing to flight planning leans on connected systems. Traffic lights in many cities keep blinking on their own local controllers, but the coordination between them degrades. Nothing has exploded. That is what makes it eerie. The disaster is not fire and rubble. The disaster is silence, friction, and queues. Day 3. Cash is now the only money that works, and rumors are the only news that spreads. And rumors, without any way to check them, mutate fast. This is not pure speculation, by the way. Pieces of this scenario have already happened. In 2011, during a national uprising, the Egyptian government deliberately switched off the country's internet, and tens of millions of people spent days cut off from the online world while banks, businesses, and families scrambled around the outage. Estonia, one of the most digital nations on Earth, saw waves of cyber attacks in 2007 hammer its banks, media, and government services. The lesson from every real-world case is the same. Modern life does not degrade gracefully when the network goes away. It snaps. But here's the thing. The strangest part of this entire scenario is still ahead, and it is not about money or traffic or empty shelves. It is about what happens inside your own head. Because the most fragile system connected to the internet is not the power grid. It is you. Psychologist Betsy Sparrow and her colleagues published research in the journal Science describing something now known as the Google effect. In plain English, it works like this. When your brain knows that a piece of information can be looked up later, it quietly decides not to store the information itself. Instead, it stores the location. Your memory has stopped keeping facts and started keeping addresses. Scientists call this transactive memory, which simply means outsourcing your remembering to something outside your skull. Couples do it with each other. One partner remembers birthdays, the other remembers directions. You have done it with a machine. How many phone numbers do you actually know by heart? What about the route to a place you have driven 50 times, but always with a glowing blue line guiding you? Now the blue line is gone. And this is the counterintuitive twist of the whole scenario. Losing the internet would not just take away a tool, the way losing a hammer does. It would take away a piece of your mind that you had quietly moved outside your body. People who lived in 1990 were not tougher or smarter than you. Their knowledge simply lived inside their heads because it had nowhere else to go. Yours lives in a data center you have never seen, behind a password you probably stored in the very system that just vanished. The blackout would not only disconnect your devices, it would disconnect you from parts of your own memory, your own sense of direction, your own competence. Survivors of real extended outages consistently describe the same feeling, and it is not boredom. It is amputation. And yet, slowly, something unexpected would begin to grow in the wreckage. By the end of the first week, your street would know each other's names. Not because anyone became a better person overnight, but because information itself would become local again. The neighbor with a working radio becomes the newsroom. The person who knows first aid becomes the clinic. The kid with a shelf of paper books becomes the library. Amateur radio operators, a hobby community that never stopped practicing for exactly this kind of day, would suddenly form the backbone of long-distance communication, the way they often do after hurricanes and earthquakes. Civilization would not end. It would contract, from a planet-sized web of strangers back down to the size of a neighborhood. Humans ran that model for roughly 10,000 years. You would remember how faster than you think. Would it be romantic? No. Be honest with yourself. It would be frightening, inconvenient, and for people who depend on connected systems for medicine, income, or safety, genuinely dangerous. The point of this thought experiment is not that you would be better off around a candle. The point is that you have built your entire life on a single layer of infrastructure, and you have never once been asked to imagine that layer failing. So bring this back to your ordinary day, right now in the world where everything still works. When you tap your card at a checkout, you are trusting a chain of undersea cables and distant servers you will never see. When you follow the blue line to a friend's house, you are borrowing a memory you chose not to form. When you feel that reflexive itch to check your phone, some part of that itch is your own outsourced brain, reaching for the piece of itself you stored somewhere else. There are boring, practical answers to this fragility, and they fit on one shelf. Some cash, some water, a paper list of the phone numbers that matter, a battery radio, knowing which neighbor you would actually knock for. None of it is paranoid. Space agencies like NASA and government weather services run permanent forecasting operations for solar storms for exactly this reason. The people who understand the system best are the ones quietly watching the sun. Because here's the final thing to sit with. The internet is the largest machine human beings have ever built, and you live inside it. It has no off switch, no single owner, and no backup copy. It has survived every day so far, not because it is invincible, but because its weakest moments, a solar near miss in 2012, a 6-hour corporate blackout, a country switched off for days, were small enough or brief enough to be forgotten. So tomorrow morning, you will wake up, and every screen in your house will be glowing. Everything will load. And now you know that this ordinary, boring, miraculous moment is not a guarantee. It is a streak. And every streak, somewhere out there in the dark, is just waiting for the day it breaks.